Flop texture refers to the look and feel of the flop. Are all the cards high or maybe low, close together, far apart? Is there more than one card of the same suit, or maybe even all three cards are the same suit? Logically speaking, flop texture is the chance that the flop hits your opponents or the chance that it hits you. If we're thinking about the flop and how likely it is that it helps our opponent's hands, we have to be prepared for our opponents thinking the same thing about us. Their perception of how strong our hand is once the flop comes out is going to inform what action is best for us to take. So how do you figure out the flop texture? How do you derive the chance that it helped your opponent's hand? You got to piece together a few different variables. You've got to consider position. Where at the table is that player seated? What bets has he made or called to this point? And what's his general style? Is he tight, loose, passive, aggressive? All these variables will help you come up with a range, a distribution of hands that he's likely to hold in this given situation. If you compare that range with the flop, you'll start to understand the flop texture, the likelihood that the flop hit the range of your opponents as well as your range. And again, when we're talking about your range, we're not talking about the actual range. We're talking about the perceived range. What is the distribution of cards that your opponents think you would be playing in this situation, given your position, bet sizing, and style? If your perceived range is strong, meaning that it hit the flop, that it connected and really improved your hand, it's going to be difficult to value bet. Value bet less. Consider checking or checking back so as to widen your opponent's betting range on the turn and get extra value from him that way. On the other side of the coin, bluffing, of course, becomes easier because your opponent's going to give you credit and likely fold. He thinks your range hit the flop. If your perceived range is weak, meaning it missed the flop, value betting, of course, is important to do. You can value town your opponents. Bet all three streets if you can. They think you're weak. They'll keep calling. Same token, bluffing is much more difficult. They're not going to give you credit. They're going to call you down. Let's take a look at a bunch of example flops here over on the right. They're all ranked actually on a continuum from what we call dry to wet. A dry flop is something that just objectively is unlikely to hit most players' hands and hold them. King high and ace high flops, for example, and even flops with two face cards. Let's take the king high flop. There's only 3 other kings in the deck, and without one of those kings, it's going to be hard to continue when you're facing a bet on this board. So when you see a king and ace high flop, it's a good opportunity to c-bet, even as a bluff, because unless your opponent has that king or that ace, he's going to have to fold. And even on a hand like, or a flop like king jack 4, your opponent's probably going to have a strong jack to continue. So you represent the king by c-betting, and he'll probably have to fold jacks with kickers around 10 or below. So c-bet all these 3. As we continue down the spectrum, we have paired boards, 10-6-6, or just boards with all low cards. These boards are unlikely to have hit anybody, and most players understand that. So you can try and c-bet here, but just know that you're likely to get called. Your perceived range missed this flop as well. So you can't just c-bet the flop, you'll actually have to bet again on the turn. This is called double barreling. because you have to fire one bullet on the flop and a second bullet on the turn. But usually that turn bet is plenty to make your opponent fold, assuming they didn't get lucky and make a set of sixes on the 10-6-6 board. Now we're exiting dry flop territory and looking at wet flops. Here's a really wet flop, monotone, all hearts. This is an anomaly. It's actually a good flop to c-bet, especially against a tight, aggressive opponent. A tag here is probably going to fold if he doesn't have a heart, and the chances of not having a heart are actually 50%. If you watch our video on hand equity and pot odds, you'll be able to do the math that as long as our c-bet is less than or equal to the size of the pot, it'll be profitable against a tag opponent. Of course, if you're against more than one opponent, or he's loose aggressive, loose passive even, you're probably not going to be able to reach profitability here. The bottom two flops are pretty classic wet flops. Here we have several straight draws as well as a flush draw. And in the bottom, there's no flush draw, but there's straight draws and all three cards are face cards. Both flops hit multiple players' ranges. They just, starting hands and hold'em so commonly connect with these boards, and because of that, you really should never be c-bet bluffing these boards. Value bet though, and value bet aggressively. Because if you have a made hand, even something like 2-pair on these boards, you need to define your hand early. You need to give the opportunity for a set or a made straight to show you that, so you can get out of the hand. The value bet has the dual effect of not giving free cards to unmade draws as well. Start paying careful attention to flop texture. You'll find that you won't just get more value out of your made hands, but you'll also start to see brilliant opportunities to bluff the flop.